I'm Lincoln Sennett of Swan's Honey, and we're going to do a little different this year for our bee school because of the virus. Instead of having a large classroom, we're going to do a combination of YouTube and a WebEx question and answer sessions kind of on a nightly basis after we get going. And hopefully that will satisfy a lot of what people have for questions, and we'll try and work something out towards the end of the classes. We'll try and work something out, maybe smaller groups of people that can be spread out to actually see some demonstrations out in the field after the bees arrive. Okay, first of all, let's talk about why do you want to become a beekeeper. That's the first thing I usually ask classes, and usually people have some good reasons, and some people have some reasons that aren't so good. The most common reasons, people have always wanted to do beekeeping, they're fascinated by it, the educational aspect to it, and people really enjoy it once they get going. I mean, it's a lot of people, we call them hobbyists, but they are, it becomes a real passion for people, and they really get into it, and before you know it, you start off with 1 or 2 hives. Before you know it, you have 10 hives, or in the case of us, you end up with thousands of hives. So anyways, that's the first thing. Second one is people like to have bees for pollination. If you have bees in your backyard, you've got a garden, you get better yields on your vegetables if you really have good pollination. So a lot of people like them for that. The third reason, some people like to produce their own honey. They just like to produce their own food. They have their own garden, and they also like to do their own honey for their own consumption. Probably the fourth reason, which is the worst reason, is thinking that you're going to do it to make money. Beekeeping, if you produce that honey, it might be the best honey you've ever tasted, but it'll probably also be the most expensive honey that you've ever had. It's a lot more efficient for large-scale operations to produce honey and provide it for the consumption via the grocery store. That's much cheaper than actually getting your own bees and trying to produce your own honey. Okay, first thing I'd like to talk about are resources that are available out there. We actually use a book in the class. We have this available in the store, and it's called The Backyard Beekeeper, and it works out well as a beginning book. There's lots of pictures, so there's a lot of pictures throughout the book to kind of go along with all the descriptions of all the aspects of beekeeping. So this is a good book. We have it available here. We also have some folders. I mean, the folders will be at no charge if people are interested in beekeeping. A lot of the handouts came actually from Jennifer Lund, the state apiarist. And there are a lot of things that kind of go along with the class and kind of supplement the stuff that I talk about. Also, other resources, there's a couple of good periodicals out there. We have Bee Culture and American Bee Journal, and those are both monthly magazines. There's a lot of good beekeeping articles in there. A lot of it's geared towards beginning beekeeping as well as people that have been in it for a while. So it kind of are popular amongst all different levels of experience. The other place, there's a lot of other books out there. Some are good, some not as good. Beekeeping tends to be local. There are certain things that are better described by people that are like northern beekeepers than people that are southern beekeepers if you're going to winter your bees over, for example. There's differences in whether or not you operate your bees in a double deep, which means 2 big boxes like this for your brood chamber, which is where your queen and your brood is, or whether or not you run a single deep. Down south, a lot of times people run their bees differently, and they'll actually only have a single deep for that brood chamber. So it's good to at least get the reference information that you have kind of put it in context of where that particular beekeeper is located, because things are a little bit different depending on where you are. The honey flows, like when the bees are going to actually make honey, you're going to be different from one place to another. How strong the honey flows are will impact how you're going to actually do your beekeeping. The other resource, the internet has a lot of stuff out there. And some of it's, I used to tell people to stay away from the internet, but there are getting to be a lot of good YouTube videos out there. But you just have to kind of be a little bit careful. It used to be a lot of these chat rooms, and there was a lot of bad information that was thrown around in these chat rooms. People that were giving information out in the chat rooms a lot of times didn't have as much experience as the people that they were actually giving the advice to. So you got to be a little bit careful of the chat room, but some of the YouTube videos are good now, and there are a lot of resources there, especially if you're sitting home during the virus and you want to look at some YouTube videos. You can get some background through a lot of the beekeeping ones that are out there. Okay, the first area of beekeeping that I want to talk about is where are you going to put your hive of bees? Okay, obviously most people are going to be putting them at their house somewhere, and there are going to be certain things that you're going to be looking for in a beekeeping location, or where your hive placement location is going to be. You want a place that's high and dry. Okay, that's one criteria. You want a place that's sheltered, especially with our winters up here in Maine. It's nice to have some shelter from the north, and you'd like to have your bees facing to the south. A real good location tends to be places where it's sort of like a little microclimate, where the grass turns green earliest in the spring. That's kind of like a microclimate where it's a little more sheltered. A good example would be on the south side of your house. You'll see that happen. Well, you can also see that at the edge of fields and on the south side of fields that are backed up by like a lot of trees that are kind of a windbreak, that kind of a thing. So that's a good location. You also have to take into account that you need a water source. Your water source should not be your neighbor's pool, okay? Because the bees are going to go to that closest water source. Even though that pool may have be treated water, the bees don't mind that one bit, okay? And your neighbor will definitely be complaining. So you got to consider that they are going to go to the closest water source when you select your place for your bees. The last thing to think of, which kind of goes along with the water source, is you don't want the bees to be a nuisance. Okay, you do need to take into consideration that these bees they do want to defend their nest, so you don't want to put the bees near where there's a lot of other activity. Other people. You don't want to put them on your property line next to your neighbor where their neighbor's garden is. You want to put these bees where they've got some space between them and other activity. They don't like things in their flight path. So if the bees are going to come out and they're going to fly pretty much a straight line to wherever their nectar sources are, you don't want to have that straight line be across where there's other traffic where people are going to be. Like let's say a bike path or something. You don't want bees zooming across a bike path and be stinging people that are actually riding their bikes in that bike path or walking on that bike path. Okay, so that's something to take into consideration. If you pick the right locations, you won't have any problems. Another thing, like in cities, what people do in order to get the bees away from a certain area that's a sensitive flight path is they'll put a fence around, and sort of the bees actually have to go up and clear that fence in order to range out from the hive. And the bees will not go to the base of that fence and go up. They're going to actually come back. They're going to go out and come back the shortest distance. So that once they clear that fence, they're going to stay above the ground level, above that height of that fence. That's a trick that's done a lot of times in inner cities when people have beehives there. Okay, so that's kind of the first thing. The next thing we're going to get into is going to be equipment, and that's going to be for the next video. And we're going to go over all the parts of the hive and what kinds of equipment that you're going to need. I guess the last thing I'll say is people do ask this question, what's the cost going to be? Well, I usually tell people that to plan on, somewhere between $150 and $175 for each of 3 components of beekeeping. $150 to $175 for their bees, $150 to $175 for the equipment, the actual hive that you're going to put the bees in, and $150 to $175 of other types of equipment like a bee suit, smoker, hive tool, etc. That third piece doesn't matter how many hives you have, you only have to have that cost once. The first 2 components though, that the bees and the equipment, you'll need to put out that cash outlay for each of those parts of being a beekeeper. In the future, hopefully you'll be able to split your bees and you won't have to purchase the bees, you'll only have to purchase the equipment.